All right, we're ready when you're ready.
I'm never ready.
We got you.
Calling to order DeKalb County Council meeting on Wednesday, June 11th, 2025. Opening prayer by Amy Prosser.
Yes, if you would please bow your heads with me and pray. Heavenly Father, we are so abundantly grateful for your goodness and kindness, your mercy and your grace. We just ask for your wisdom today, and as we do business for the DeKalb County citizens, we ask, Lord, that you would give us your wisdom on how to proceed with a lot of pressing issues in our communities. And Lord, we're just ever so grateful. We pray all these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Will you please rise and join me in saying Pledge Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. All right, the minutes. I suppose everyone's looked it over. Is there any additions, corrections, or anything? I'll take a motion to approve them. If not,
There was an issue, I think in one of the paragraphs about the wheel tax. It mentioned, I brought it up here quickly. In the paragraph about the wheel tax, it said, I think Marion County got 50,000. I think that should have been million. And I think it addressed like there was some amounts that.
All right, I'm looking for it.
It was like in the middle of the page, if I remember right. Wheel under, nope, it said, there's another paragraph. It says, very short, one line, wheel tax. Says after the commission, in the commissioner discussion, there was Don Lauer condolences, and then the wheel tax. Yep, the railroads will be getting, it should be 20 million, not 20,000. And Marion County is getting 50 million, not 50,000.
Okay. That's fine.
It was just a simple typo, I think.
I have a motion for the passing of the minutes with the corrections made.
I'll make that motion.
We have a motion and a second. Any more discussions? Aye. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you. Now we go to the, let me get this right, additions and transfer requests. Right?
Yep.
The first one here is from the Airport Accumulated Building Fund 425. Addition. You gotta remember what I'll have to read here. Yep.
Let me get them.
So I make sure I read everything right. Just got to read this front page.
So the first one is the Airport Authority. They are asking for $989,755.78 to be appropriated in their cumulative building fund. And that is because they plan to purchase their new multi-purpose snow removal equipment. They originally had planned for it in their rainy day, but have changed their minds and want to use the cum building fund that they have, so they're appropriating it in there.
This is not appropriated before. I'm trying to understand why it isn't a simple transfer.
It was appropriated into a different fund. It was appropriated into rainy day fund,
Yep.
and so you can't just transfer it from one fund to another. So they have to appropriate it into their cum fund so they're able to spend it. Like, I can't transfer county general money to highway because they're different funds, so different fund numbers. Had they had it already under that fund number, just in a different account,
Okay.
then they could transfer it, but it's not in there yet.
Understood.
Thank you.
Do I have a motion for approval?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
Any other discussion among the council, the public? Any comments, Randy?
There's no removal equipment. They're
Okay, you got to come to the mic so people can hear you.
Sorry, I didn't realize I was being discussed. The one piece of equipment I think has arrived.
Yes, Russ said so.
Yep. And they're looking forward to getting it, they're being trained on the equipment to get it ready for this coming season. I guess I missed the discussion. Was there any particular question or?
I think Bill was just playing with you, actually.
I was throwing my authority around.
You know, I used to be able to do that. I can't even do it at home anymore. I'm going to sit down.
Okay, and if there's no other comments, we'll call for the vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? None. Vote carries, what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 5, nothing. So, all right, our next one is emergency management. Hazard Migration Grant 8105, account number 32780, other service fees. The total amount requested is $7,803. Entire fee is $20,304. The request is amount remaining to be paid. Was this included in the annual budget request? No. Grant approved after budget work in 2025. To pay, what is the appropriate to be used? To pay professional service for multi-hazard migration plan update. How is the cost determined? Christopher Blake Engineering. Is this a recurring expense? No. Will other expenditure be necessary? No. Was this discussed with their liaison? Yes. Rick Green. Do I have a motion for approval?
So moved.
A second?
Second.
Is there any discussion among the council?
Just so that everybody understands, this is, this actually will be refunded by a state grant. We need to pay the fees up front for this Burke group to do the actual work. They've held a number of public meetings and a number of meetings that brought together all the different cities and towns and organizations in the county to do this hazardous mitigation plan. Without this plan, we do not qualify to receive any FEMA money if there should be a disaster in the county. So this is something that's necessary. It's redone every 5 years, I believe, is the length of time. There was a concern 6 weeks ago that the state was going to cancel the grant due to the state's funding, but they have since received word that no, the grants are approved and will be paid. So this money that's being appropriated will be reimbursed by the state.
Rick, in order for us to get that FEMA, those FEMA dollars, you're saying this is attached to that. We have to do this study in order to get FEMA dollars in the case of an emergency in the future. Is this a reoccurring thing that we have to do every year?
Every 5 years.
Every 5 years.
This has to be done every 5 years.
And will there be grants to do those in the future, every 5 years?
There always have been.
Okay.
Who knows what's going to happen 5 years from now?
So I just was curious if this was a one-time grant and then.
No, I don't think.
But we've been doing
I
this in
think
the
they've
past.
always been, this has always been reimbursed by.
Okay.
And it actually runs through Homeland Security at the state. So we'll have more information from them as we get closer to that 5-year mark.
Thank you.
Any other questions from council or the public? We'll call for the motion. All in favor, say yes.
Yes.
Aye.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. Aye. No. Total confusion, people. You know I'm not a good reader.
You're doing just
You're
fine.
fine.
Bill.
Sweat's running off. I should have worn my tank top. That wouldn't have been so hot. I knew when I cut my,
You got a haircut for this deal, so this.
yeah, right. I should have left it long and then cut it, and then no one would know who I was. Okay, the department, the auditor. The Brownfield Grant, fund number 8200, account number 32782, title Brownfield Grant. Total amount request, $496,650. Was this included in the annual budget request? Grant approved after budget work in 2025. How will the appropriation be used to pay professional service for EPA brownfield assessment grants? How was this determined? BCA Environment and Consultant Agreement. Is this a recurring expense? No. Will other expenses be necessary? No. Was this discussed with their liaison? Yes. Liaison's name? Robert Kraft. Do you know?
You're so animated.
The,
Do I have a motion for the approval of this
so moved.
request?
Oh, I'll second.
We have a motion and a second,
Is this
and discussion from the council.
brownfield grant for a specific area or?
So this is, no, it can be all over. Chris Gallmer and Anton King, like, they're all working together, and they have a list, I don't know how many, but I know there's some places in Butler and I think Garrett.
So it's
It's
not
all over.
associated with Bond Aluminum or that
No.
work that they're doing there?
No, it's the entire county, and it's, like, there's not been a specific site,
Okay,
and it can be multiple sites.
okay.
Any other discussion in council? Public? Call for the vote. All in favor, say. Aye.
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 I'll write this down. All opposed, same. Motion carried 5-0. See, yeah, my Alzheimer's is kicking in. Okay, transfers. All right, the first one is from the prosecuting office, out of the general fund 101. Account number 1001-11272-009-008, which is Deputy Prosecutor number 52. Account number 1001-32790-000-008. Other service fees of $47,500. The expense of the program is not anticipated at the time of the budget last year. However, we have continued to be functioned properly with software subscription service is necessary. The transfer is needed to cover our cost. Will additional appropriations be requested due to the transfer? No. Was it discussed with liaison? Yes. Liaison's name, Amy Densky. Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Is there any discussion among the county council?
Was this different than something that we talked about earlier?
No, he was in prior, and we
The
discussed.
presentation?
We discussed all of it because there's prosecutor and public defender both doing this
Right.
program. And so this is just the formal move of the money.
That, okay, thank you. Clarifies it for me.
Did we do the public defender last time? thought we'd already,
Well,
I know we've talked to both of them.
you agreed to support their decision. I don't remember if we did it or not.
I think we did. I had the same thought.
That's what I,
I think,
Because I think there was a question of whether it was a both. Last time we did it, and it was, no, we're gonna do that the next time, so I think that this is. But we did discuss it.
Any more discussion? Public? Call for the motion, call for the vote. All in favor, say aye.
aye?
All opposed, same sign. Carried, 5-0.
I just looked and it was an additional appropriation last meeting for them, for public defender.
My next one says Sunny Meadows, but I don't have a copy of it in my folder.
Oh,
I go to the clerk's office, which is next, right?
Sunny Meadows is on the second page. There's,
There's a lot in,
it says
probably
invoice.
Oh, there it is.
there's a lot.
And then on the back of that invoice
After
page.
the-
Yeah, okay, I found it. There, I'll give you the page back.
thank you.
I seen approved, and I thought, well, that ain't nothing we have to do, so. The next transfer request is from Sunny Meadows. General, 1001. The amount to be transferred is $65,400. Account number 1080 to the other 234340, constructional, I can't say that.
Contractual consultant.
Okay, you know what I mean. $50,400. The other one was from 10,800, other to 34333, contract staff, 15,000. Hired consultant to place residents and using the staff company to fill a position to ensure residents are cared for. Will there be additional appropriations requested? Is it transplant? No. Was to discuss with liaison? Yes. Robert Kraft. Have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Have a motion, do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you,
Who, Amy Prosser?
Professor.
Yeah. Any discussion among the council?
This 50,000, was the number we spoke about earlier, or was presented to us earlier, somewhere near 70,000 for that consultant fee, or is this just extra money in that to pay for that? Seems like the number 70,000 when Kellen Dooley was in, it was gonna cost us around 70,000 with the consultant. Is that, am I recalling that correctly?
I would have to look that up, but
Well, this total is close, is 65.4. so
Right. I was
Well,
thinking for the consultant fee
the
alone.
consultant is the 5,400. The 50,400, if it's more, that is just what we need to get to the end of the year.
Right. This is, it is to the end of the year. If it extends beyond that, we may have to look at.
That will be done in the budget work that we're getting ready to do. But I'll look up the contract.
I don't know if we were discussing contract that day or he was just giving us, speculation numbers at that point when he
Yeah, I was gonna see here.
just seemed like it was a lot more than this number. That's what comes to mind.
I'm assuming we've lost staff out there that we had before.
Oh, we always lose staff out there.
Well, I guess what I mean is that, so the contract staff is so we can bring in people to continue to care because other folks have left.
Other folks have left, or it wasn't fully staffed to begin with, so there wasn't people for all shifts. So there's been some people that have come in from manpower to at least cover some of the shifts to keep us going until everything gets finished.
We know how many residents.
residents do we have out there now? Down to what, 18, 19 before?
No, I think we got,
I was thinking
16,
16.
I believe, when
we had 17 and one has moved, and so we've got 16. We have one more that is getting ready to relocate within the next month or so. Rick, the agreement, the payment for services is she's paid $72 per hour with agreement to work up to 20 hours per week. So I would have just taken the 72 by the 20 for what we need for the end of the,
Maybe that 72 is what I'm remembering. I was thinking it was like 72,000 for the whole contract.
maybe, I say, I don't.
Thanks for checking that. It just,
Yeah, I don't see a full number anyways.
thank you.
Yep.
Any more discussion? Anything from the public? We'll call for the vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. 5-0. Okay, from the clerk's office. Under Cume Cap, 1138, total amount to be transferred, 100,000. Account 31046, courthouse repair to 44410, furniture fixtures, 100,000. When we request the money to remodel when we request money for the remodel, all the money was in one fund. We needed to transfer to pay invoices according. Will the additional appropriations be requested due to the transfer? No. Discussion with your liaison? Yes. Amy Dembski. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Do I hear a second? Any discussion among the council?
I did have a question. I missed this during budget time, and from what I understand, there was a complete overhaul in the clerk's office, which I think amounted to about $250,000. Is that right? Is that what the total cost was? Sure, Dana, thanks for coming.
Yeah, so we were appropriated $250,000 to do plaster repair, paint, carpet, new furniture, basically redo the whole office.
Got it and redo it.
Yeah. So the money, we're just moving from that original $250,000 to cover our furniture expenses.
Work about done?
We are halfway done, so they just got the criminal office cleared out, and the electrician was in yesterday, and the painter should be in next week to redo the plaster and the paint.
So was it just the one office? Is it just your office that was getting redone, or was there
It's all,
multiple
it's
rooms?
the whole, yeah, all rooms.
So just for clarity's sake, for the public who's listening, who may be going, how in the world are we spending $250,000 to remodel one office? Can you clarify that a little bit more?
Yeah, so our one office is made up of 6 rooms. We take up half the floor, half the second floor of the courthouse. So it is a large area, and to redo plaster itself is a big expense. So we had a lot of plaster damage. It'd probably been about 40 years since our office has had anything done to it. So the repair was pretty extensive.
And the furniture is not like leisure furniture. It's
No,
like
it's
85-inch
office
big screen
cubicles.
TV,
Yeah, you know, a lounge.
lounge chairs. That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, yeah.
we're all gonna go take a break over there.
Yeah,
Now,
and
it's,
definitely come walk through. I mean,
Yes.
it's looking really good. Half of it's done, so you can see, you know, we're all kind of in temporary stations right now as we're doing the remodel. But yeah, we're halfway there. We're hoping to be done by September-ish, maybe. So we'll see, as long as it keeps moving at the pace it is.
Some of what you've done is change the flow of the office to make the office flow better.
Correct. Yeah, we moved where voter registration is.
'Cause you've
Instead
got-
of having to go into that middle room, it's a straight shot into another office now. So the flow of it will be a lot
Also some
more
privacy
conducive.
Concerns.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah, definitely come check it out when you're done.
and the 250,000 was simply a guesstimate at budget time. They had no idea what it would end up.
So what has been the cost so far then?
I could go back and look at everything that's paid out. We are, I mean, we're pretty good. Like, I feel like we have some leeway, so we do have some Title IV money, Title 4D money that we earn that I can use to offset some of the costs, but it's pretty limited. But I use it when I can to help keep the other costs down. But yeah, I can get you a number for sure.
It looks like, I'm trying to think, the equipment might have been
The furnace,
voter
the what?
registration stuff.
That one was the one that just got done. And I sent, Amy
So-
had reached out to me yesterday, and I did send her all the paperwork from Bassett's with the outlay, or, you know, the way it's gonna lay out and all the quotes. So I can get that to
So
you
we
tomorrow.
budgeted, total for clerk's office in CUMCAP, we budgeted 367,600. 117,600 was in equipment, and I'm thinking that that was not part of the remodel.
I'm gonna have to-
But I'd have to look. But
Yeah.
out of that, we've spent 190,667 out of the 367.
And when we finish with the clerk's office, we've renovated the clerk's office. In previous years, we've done renovations in the auditor's office. We've renovated the recorder's office. We've renovated the treasurer's office. So a lot of repairs in that had been neglected over the years or put off, you know, and we just can't keep putting everything off. But that, I don't know what needs to be done on third floor, but that seems to me that that covers pretty much first floor and second floor, so third floor would be the next that might have to be looked at.
I look, the 117,600, that was for micro vote, so that's not part of the
Oh,
remodel.
yeah, that was where we're splitting it up over the course
Yeah.
of 4 years to pay for
years.
our new equipment.
So-
That's totally separate.
That piece of it. So out of CUMCAP, there's been
Correct.
like maybe 74,000 for the remodel so far.
Total then so far has just been,
About 74,000, and maybe a little more out of Title 4D, but not a lot.
And I have a couple outstanding invoices that just came in, so I'd have to
Yeah.
add that into it as well.
Now, was it hard to find someone to do the plaster work? Just because we don't install plaster anymore?
No, we were we had somebody recommended to us who's done other offices here in the county, and he's really big on historic buildings, so he's good at preserving the historic touch of the building, and he loves doing it, and it's pretty flawless, honestly, because we had some pieces that were literally chunks missing out of the wall or pulling away from pillars, and you can't even tell anymore. And I'm documenting it, so I will have before and after pictures as well. Thank you.
Any more questions for her? Thank you. Now we'll call, any other comments from the public? We'll call for the vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed?
aye.
Who was that, Amy? The vote, 4-1. Department, the auditor. The auditor ineligible, what is that,
Ineligible fund.
ineligible? Fund 1215, total amount to be transferred, $2,958. Account 2110 to office supplies, to account number 32780, other service fees of $2,958. I paid for the capital assessment consultant fee along with the LOW fees for documentary and online deduction capability through Beacon Schrader. Will additional appropriations be due for transfer? No. Was this discussed with the liaison? Yes, Robert Kraft. Do I have a motion to approve the transfer?
So moved.
I have a second? Okay. I have any discussion? Anything from the public?
Susan, what, this DocuSign is what this is?
Well, I pay for DocuLivery, which is what everybody gets their, like, check stubs and W-2s through the electronic, and online deductions, and then capital asset consultant. Every few years, we go through a whole capital asset plan to make sure we're at the threshold of what we should be reporting on. And so I just chose to pay for his fee out of there this year instead of my county general budget. And the auditor's ineligible fund is, the money going in there is when we come across somebody that has claimed homestead and they're not eligible to claim homestead. So by statute, we can back bill them for 3 years for their ineligible time.
We'll call for the vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Same sign. Vote carries 5-0. All right, phone shut up. Okay, next one's for the auditor for RDC.
For redevelopment.
You know, we got
Do you want me to
three of these.
explain these?
Yeah, why don't you go ahead and
Okay.
explain it, because
So the next three,
we'll take as one vote.
so we have 3 TIF funds for redevelopment commission. And when we budget for redevelopment, we budgeted in their miscellaneous expenditure account, 99,500, because at budget time, they don't always know what projects they're going to do or put money towards. So since then, this year, they have discussed, and I included in all of your documents, all the resolutions that they approved. They are going to be putting some money to the Butler Police Department for a drone, a couple new vehicles, part of their, some like light up signs, and then there's also, okay, so for Butler Police, there's those items. Then there's a Butler Fire that they're going to be purchasing a new fire rig, I believe is what they call it. So the SDI TIF and the New Millennium TIF will split those expenditures in half. Then late in '24, there was an approval for Auburn to have Auburn Hazmat Facility Training Center, and it's a center that many different municipalities and people will come to train. So those expenses are being spread across all 3 TIF funds. So these are the expenditures that I know of so far spread apart. So for SDI and New Millennium, there's $6,814.50 going for police equipment. There's $58,520.50 each going for purchase of a vehicle. There's $6,386.33 for the hazmat facility. And that part of it was just for a container, like a train car container. That was the first thing that they purchased. Then $86,874.50 going for equipment in each of those. And then the American Heritage TIF Fund will just have the transfer of $6,386.33 for the hazmat facility.
So the SDI TIF totals out at 158,595.83 for all 4 of those.
Correct, as well as the New Millennium is the same amount.
Susan, I just want to make sure I heard you right. When you were talking about in the first section of the SDI TIF, the purchase vehicles for the Butler Police Department, did you say $58,520.50 each vehicle, or is that for the 2 vehicles?
So that was for each TIF. Each TIF will pay that amount. So that 58 times 2
Gotcha, okay, all right.
is the total amount.
Thank you.
all of this went through the RDC. They've approved it all, but the SDI TIF, is that one coming to an end?
Yes,
So
but they,
is that?
but they have money in
Is
there.
this, if it comes to an end, what happens to the money that remains after this is spent?
They keep it to spend on other projects.
Still has the authority to approve expenditures, but like the city of Butler had to submit requests.
they had to
Everybody has
apply.
to submit requests and apply.
But I guess my point is, no additional money is going to be put into that fund because the TIF expires.
That's my
But they can stay operating until the money is all expended.
Correct.
Okay, that's my point. And I don't know about the new Millennium TIF, how long that one goes yet. American Heritage, that's the one over at Bruce Plaza and that.
New Millennium expires December 2029. American Heritage expires December 2031. Now, SDI still has an expanded portion, very, very, very small, so not any kind of large revenue. And that expires June of 2038.
What was the new Millennium, 28?
2029.
SDI's.
The large one, yeah. The end of this month.
Oh, this month? Oh, okay.
Any more discussion on this? I'll take a motion to approve the transfers.
Can we do all three of them at the same time?
Four of them, there's four of them. We'll do all four of them unless someone wants to
Oh, we're
separate.
gonna just do with the SDI TIF.
Yeah. There's four of them, right?
Right, yeah, there are four.
Yeah,
For SDI, yes.
yeah, we'll have to go to the next one.
In the 4501, there's 4, yes.
So I believe he's just asking for the SDI TIF approval right now.
We go to the SDI, the four that we have discussed here on the 4501 SDI, that she just explained to us, 681450, the 58,520.50, 6,386.33, and the 86,874.50. Do I have a motion to approve the transfer of the SDI TIF?
I'll make that motion.
Motion by Amy Prosser. Do I have a second?
Second.
By Rick Kahn. Any more discussion? If not, I call for the vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Carries 5-0. Next one. Okay, next one is the American Heritage TIP 4502. Probably basically the same thing. It is a transfer from miscellaneous expense of $99500 to American Hazmat, Auburn Hazmat Facility, $22,100 of $6,386.33. RDC budget a majority of these dollars in miscellaneous expense account until they knew what the type of expense they would like to need funded. Will there be any more appropriation due to the transfer? No. Discuss with liaison, yes. Robert Kraft. So do I hear a motion? Motion to approve the transfer.
So moved.
We have a motion and second. Is there any discussion among the council? Public? If not, I call for the vote. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed? Same sign. Vote carries 5-0. The last one. I gotta find it on my paper. Give me a second, I'm lost. What is the next one?
The last one would be the New Millennium TIF
Oh,
for transfers like the SDI. It's 1 penny more, I'll clarify that, just because the way that things divide out. So it's a total of 158, 595, 84.
so I need to read them all out for you. It's basically the same as it was for the SDI TIF. So do I have a motion to,
I'll make the motion to approve.
do I have a second?
Second.
Second was who?
Dembski.
Dempsey. All right, any more discussion? If not, I call for the vote. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed, same. Carries 5-0. What's our next? Is that all our transferred?
Yep.
That's all our transferred, and y'all got your packages of non-approval transfers. You can read it at your leisure. So we go to the airport update. Randy Fox.
We will start passing around your signature pages, just so you guys know. And the minutes are already updated, Amy.
You're not messing with me, right?
You got 2.5 seconds behind.
Okay, well, we are still looking at the rebranding of the Auburn DeKalb Executive Airport. Looking for a new logo. I'm wearing the old one today under my chemo does. Let's fall down. Anyway, we've chosen 3 that we wanted them to refine to, some of them are very esoteric, off into the distance kind of stuff, and some of them are pretty straightforward. They look like airplanes or associated with airports. So we're still looking at those. There was an additional appropriation in the packet today. I'm assuming it was approved. It's just redistributing money within the budget.
That's why I called you up the first time we were discussing it.
Yeah, okay. I was off in some other world, I guess. The Automated Weather Observation System, AWOS, is up and operating, and the new beacon, I think I've mentioned that before, when you're up flying, we have a green and white rotating beacon that shines out at night, and that tells pilots that it is a pilot-controlled airport where they key up their radio 5 times in 3 seconds on the airport's operational frequency, and all the runway lights turn on and stay on for about 20 minutes, so they don't have to stay on burning all night. It's probably more appropriate 5 years ago when we had all incandescent lights and they were all 220, and now everything's going LED, so it's probably not a big savings anymore, but it is a benefit to the pilots. The beacon tower, it's a tip-up tower now, so they can tip it down. They don't have to have anybody climb it. The old tower, unfortunately, was so close to the electrical wires that the contractor that installed the new tower and took the old one out said the cost would be exorbitant to take that thing down in one piece, let alone multiple pieces that could be reassembled. So the tower was cut up, taken down. They really didn't even want to hazard a guess at the cost, because we'd have to have the electrical company come in, protect all the wires. They'd be there all day while they took the tower down. And so unfortunately, the old tower is no more. We did keep the beacon that was up on top for historical purposes, but the tower is no more. The taxiway paving and lighting project is underway. We expect this week to have contractors on site. When they extended the runway, from the 2,000 feet, the taxiway was broken out as a separate project. So as it stands now, we've got taxiways on 5,000 feet of the runway. The last 2,000 feet, we do not. So if you need to or want to use the entire runway, you can taxi down, cross at one of the intersections, and then back, we call it back taxiing. You go down to the far end, turn around, do your run-ups, then take off, and you'll have the full 7,000 feet to go. Once the taxiway's done, you'll be able to stay clear of the runway until you're actually ready to leave. And so that project is happening this summer. And then next summer, we're anticipating they're going to mill off about 5 inches of asphalt on the runway, reconstitute, refill, resource, whatever the necessary actions are to then add that back on and resurface the old 5,000 feet of runway. And that'll pretty much do the major projects that we know of coming up. And again, that'll be FAA funded, we believe. The Vintage Chapter 37 guys in the fall and spring, as part of our deal with them, they help do a cleaning on the equipment so that it's ready to go. They've done that for the spring. It says the tractor arrived on June 3rd. There's my note. And Russ had said they were going to be trained on it so they could get it operating and ready to go, which they were very happy with. And then lunch on the fly. It coincides with our board meetings, but Sweet Aviation puts on a free, they'll take donations, but it's a free lunch. And sometimes we'll see 12, 15 aircraft out on the apron, and they come in, people sit around, chat, have a good afternoon. That starts noon. Our board meeting starts at 1, so if anyone wants to come to the board meeting, get a free lunch in the process, please feel free to do that. And with that, I'll take any questions that might.
I got a question out of curiosity. How many of your airplanes have to use the whole runway?
Mostly the jets.
Just the jets?
Yeah. Now, when you're training, in order to, because they charge for the airplane by engine hours, like tenths of an engine hour. So you got your Hobbs meter in there. When you're training and you want to practice landings and takeoffs, we do touch and goes, they call them. And they prohibited touch and goes at Smithfield because the runways are so short that if somebody missed, they'd end up again in Sam's Club parking lot or something. So they can't do that. A lot of the aircraft will come up here and practice here because if there's a problem, you can stop or you can hit touch and go up through the pattern, come right back and do it again. And so it's a safety factor. The ones that really need it are the jets, and mostly because if they have that, they get up to speed to take off. If there's a problem, if we only had 5,000 feet of runway, they're probably going to end up over in the horse farm. And so now we're trying to keep them on the property and make it safe for the jets. Mostly, which is really the people we're trying to attract now, is the jet traffic away from Fort Wayne to us. It's a lot more convenient. We're close. We've got cars available now that the pilots, if they need to land here, go somewhere, come back, and leave. Sweet Aviation, again, has been a godsend for the airport, I believe. And just for sake of conversation, since I mentioned Sweet, the month of April, we get our May report on Friday. They sold 34,037 gallons of avgas and 13,000 gallons of Jet A in the month of April. And our operations in April weren't all that great, but they're doing annual maintenance. They're doing pre-buy inspections. They're doing just general maintenance, ordering parts, warranty work. They're flying the airplanes out here that have the parachutes in them, have the nice cover up on the ceiling. You pull the cover, your big red handle, and you yank it. And there's a mortar that shoots a parachute out of the top of the airplane. And if you're in trouble, you pull the handle and the airplane. Every 10 years, those parachutes have to be removed, repacked, reassessed, make sure the mortar's going to work. And then, of course, it tears through the body. There's a section of the body that's designed for that because nobody wants to crash. There's a list on the website for the aircraft manufacturer that lists how many times those have been deployed and how many people's lives have been saved with the parachutes on the aircraft. So all of that service is done out here. We're still expecting at some point that Sweet Aviation is going to move a helicopter service center also up to the airport. So the Entron helicopters that are made in Michigan we believe they're going to have a service center here as well. So we'll add to the capabilities here.
And Intron is owned by Sweet, correct? They purchased that?
And, yeah, Chuck Surak bought the Entron helicopter company. And so they're talking about putting a service center up here as well.
Any more questions, for Randy? Well, thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
Our next issue is the approval of the resolution. So how much of this do you want me to read?
You just have to read the title part, because it was provided to everybody more than 48 hours in advance.
This is RCC-17.
-7, yep.
Okay, now we'll look at DeKalb County Council Resolution 2025 RRC-7. The confirmation resolutions for the creating of environment reventilation area, whatever, and real and personal property tax abatement.
This is for the Carnahan Farms, real and personal property.
Now, do I need a vote? I need a motion for approval.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second?
I have a first and second. Any discussion among the council people?
Public hearing,
What?
public hearing,
We had public hearing last time.
that's right.
I would say we're behind on that, Amanda. Any comments from the public? I'll call for the vote. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed? 4-1. Anything else we gotta do with this? Okay, we're done. We got 5 minutes before Jennifer, is Jennifer here?
Jennifer's
Oh,
here.
right there.
She is, but if you want to do a break, it'll give me time to get her
Yeah,
presentation
yeah,
set up.
that's it. We'll take a 5-10 minute break.
Aye.
Aye. No, it's yes. Yes, you gotta get it straight, guys. This is not my comfort zone. So we'll take a
Well, thank you for inviting me here to give an informational session on the wheel tax and excise surtax component of infrastructure funding. So I'm Jennifer Sharkey. I'm with the Indiana Local Technical Assistance Program, abbreviated LTAP. We're out of Purdue University, but I actually reside in Steuben County, so just north of you here. So I'll go through, there's a lot of text on here, and I can provide this as a handout afterwards, but just this describes what Indiana LTAP is. There's an LTAP in every state, and we're here to assist local units of government with your transportation infrastructure needs, whether that's through conferences, workshops, trainings, tools, and resources, with today being one of those resources. And we are a free resource. So it's no cost to the county to reach out if you have any questions or comments. I know Ben Parker, your highway superintendent, has utilized some of our on-site training opportunities with his crew. So just wanted to give that update. And then our vision and mission statement is there, but I'll go ahead for the sake of time, move forward. So again, we do everything from training, research, innovation, opportunities, safety, asset management, and then our various communication outlets. So really why I'm here today is to talk about the wheel tax and excise surtax, kind of go through what it is, how it's implemented, distributed, and utilized, as well as have some estimated revenues for your specific county and then municipalities within your county, and then also talk a little bit about House Bill 1461, which is driving some of this increased discussion on wheel tax and excise surtax with the direct distribution opportunity through that community crossings funding mechanism. So wheel tax and excise surtax are actually two separate taxes, but they must be adopted concurrently, and that's what makes up the local option highway user tax. So we sometimes abbreviate it and say LOHUT, which means wheel tax and excise surtax. It's designed to support your local road and bridge funding opportunities, and it was first passed in the Indiana legislature in 1980 for county use only. And I'll go through a little bit of a legislative history here. It was for county use only up until 2016, when the state legislature allowed municipalities population 10,000 or greater to adopt their own, which then lowered the threshold in 2017 to 5,000 population. So any of your municipalities within your county that has a population of 5,000 or greater, they are eligible to adopt their own wheel tax and excise surtax. But what's driving a lot of the conversation now is just recently in the House Bill 1461, there is a requirement that a local unit must have the wheel tax and excise surtax adopted to be eligible, not for the grant portion of community crossings, but for the direct distribution based on lane miles. So I'll get into that a little bit later in the presentation.
So that's the first distribution, not the additional or second distribution of that money.
That would be
For community crossings.
and yeah, I'll talk about it a little bit later. I'll break it down, and with the visual, it might make a bit more sense.
Okay.
So thank you. So again, it's two different taxes, two different ordinances, two different ways of identifying the rates for the vehicles, but they must be adopted or rescinded concurrently. You can't have one without the other because they do apply to different types of vehicles. So the excise surtax, this one is on your smaller, lighter vehicles. So you can see the applicable vehicles there. And then the county wheel tax portion are the larger, heavier vehicles, of which the rate is applied. And for the excise surtax, you can do it either as a flat rate, so it can be as the minimum is $7.50 per vehicle, up to $50 per vehicle with an asset management plan, which DeKalb County has in place. Now for the excise surtax for county use only, counties are able to adopt that as a percentage rate of the excise tax from 2% up to 20% for DeKalb County, with a minimum charge of $7.50. And you can have different rates for different vehicles. So you could have passenger cars at one rate, You could have motorcycles at a different rate, so it can vary within the classifications. And that same, that applies to the wheel tax as well. You can have different rates for different vehicle classes, so a truck that's greater than 11,000 pounds, you could have a certain rate and then have buses or semis at a different. And for the wheel tax, it is anywhere from $5 up to $80 as the charge that can be placed. So just to get a misconception clarified, so the county wheel tax, it's a tax per plated vehicle, so it's per registration. It's not a tax per wheel. I know the naming convention sounds a little misleading, but again, there's that example that you could have different rates for different types of vehicles should your community choose to move forward with this option. Now, there are vehicle exemptions, so vehicles that are owned by the state or a state agency, as well as a political subdivision, so your county vehicles and municipal vehicles, as well as school buses, and then some carve-outs for religious and nonprofit youth organizations, as well as funeral operations. There are some exemptions of those registrations would not need to pay a local option highway user tax. So those.
So if we wanted to? Or are they specifically carved out and said, no, we cannot do that?
That is a great question that I don't know the answer to. I'm going to notate that and reach out to the Bureau of Motor Vehicles because they're the ones that collect these fees before remitting to the county. And I wonder if there was something local that could be put in there. That's a great question. Thank you. So how to pass this? So the county council, again, must concurrently pass the two ordinances, a wheel tax ordinance and an excise surtax ordinance. But they also, if you notice in the legislative history, I believe it was in 2014, the state legislators also authorized a county income tax council to have this authority. Now, I don't know if DeKalb County has that.
Now, there are only 30-some counties that have that, and actually SB1 or 1101, one of the two, did away with those tax councils.
Okay.
After next year.
After next year, okay. Thank you. We'll notate that in future presentations. But until that time, if a county income tax council is the entity that passes it, then that entity is the only entity that can rescind or amend it. So if DeKalb County does not have that council, then you don't need to worry about that distinction. So it would all reside within the county council as far as approvals and adoption. So the effective date, basically, September 1st is a deadline to keep in mind. So if you pass a wheel tax and excise surtax ordinance prior to September 1st, let's say of 2025, so by August 31st of 2025, you put a wheel tax in place, then it would start collection in January of 2026. If it's after that date, so if it's passed on September 1st of this year or later, then it wouldn't become effective until January of the following year for collection. So just keep that in mind as you're looking at your schedules if the county is interested in moving forward with this. There's a lot of text on this slide. I'll just highlight some of the high levels, and again, this will be provided to you for reference. But both of these taxes are collected by the BMV at the time of registration payment. So each license branch collects this, and they also charge a service charge. So of the funds that are collected, the BMV actually retains 15 cents per transaction. So when we get to some of the estimates, you'll see those dollar figures subtracted out of the funds that would come to the county. And then the BMV does have the authority to adjust some of the rates based on the regular annual registration date. So as I'm not exactly sure their administrative process on that, but there is some adjustment there. If it's mid-year, they might adjust that rate. But then, and I believe your county auditor and I'm sure county treasurer are used to some of these collections reports that BMV provides, but they have some deadlines of when they need to provide that to the county for the collection so that you can properly budget in the future. And then when we get to the distribution part, so since it is a county enacted wheel tax and excise surtax, again, the county would retain a portion of it, but then it would also be distributed to all your local municipalities. So there's some provisions in there as to how that is done. It's distributed based on the local road and street formula that I'll show in the next slide. And then there are some stipulations on timelines for the county auditor as well as the county treasurer for allocating and distributing those funds to those other local units. So the local road and street distribution formula, and can you remind me the population for DeKalb County? Is it greater than 50 or less than 50? Okay. So less than 50, then it would be distributed to the cities and towns within your jurisdiction, 20% based on the population and 80% based on the mileage. And we do have some estimates that on our website that we put together that shows the distributions based on how much is collected. And I'll also have some snippets in some slides later on. So it can be used for your basically road and street and bridge needs. So to construct, reconstruct, repair, or maintain those facilities, as well as your matching grant funds for any federal aid funds or community crossings matching grant applications. So it can be used for those matching funds as well. But basically it's for highway department not operations, but highway department assets that they maintain.
So, but it has to go into the road or the bridge. It can't buy vehicles or pay salaries or anything like that. It must physically go into the road or bridge.
So that is another great question that hasn't gotten clear delineation as to the utilization for other supporting activities that are utilized to construct, reconstruct, repair, and maintain. It's not like the 1173 with the restricted MVH portion. Some communities that have passed this, they put it into their MVH unrestricted side to help support activities there. Some of them create it as a separate account and put their own local utilization on it, so they might make it even more strict. Some communities have sunsetted this where they have it in place for a certain amount of time for maybe certain projects, and then they rescind it. So it's how your local unit wants to proceed. Oh, go ahead.
There's a lot of leeway, it sounds like, on how we distribute these funds moving forward than in the past where it seemed like it was very restricted. Is that changed, or am I just not understanding that?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So it is being able to utilize in the highway department activities, not necessarily where, if you want to support a law enforcement, let's say, operation or something that could be helping with flagging traffic. I know sometimes in larger projects, you might have an officer sitting there. I think it still has to be within the highway department use, but as far as notating if it's supporting in-house labor for in-house work, there's some flexibility there.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yeah. So currently, there's 55, possibly 56. We're still confirming one county that may have just adopted it, but 55 counties across the state that have a wheel tax, excise surtax in place. Since the operation change where cities and towns can adopt it, there's 16 that have adopted it thus far since 2017. You can see the list there, with Carmel being the most recent. So I believe they'll start collecting those funds in January of 2027.
But that limit was 5,000 population.
Yes, it began at 10,000, and then the subsequent year it lowered it to 5,000. So yeah.
So in DeKalb County, the only two cities that could apply would be Auburn or Garrett.
Okay.
If they were to do that, would the rates be stackable?
Yes,
So
so
you would pay both?
correct. residents of those municipalities would pay both the county and the city wheel tax or excise surtax.
They would have the same upper limit. So,
Yes, yes. Although municipalities, they do not have the option for the percentage base for the excise surtax. So they just have flat fee that they can apply. Correct.
if the city were to distribute or to have their own, the county would not have to fund or send any of their collection to the cities if they had their own?
No, they would still
They would
receive
still
the
get part of the county
distribution.
fund.
Yes, because their residents are still paying into the county.
Okay.
Yeah, there was an amendment early on this last session to unstack it. And it passed, but then later in the process, there was an amendment to put that back in. So it did not change from the current legislation, but there has been a lot of discussion, and that could be something that comes back in a future state legislative session.
So in our county, if Garrett and Auburn want to receive a distribution of the CCMG money, they would need to adopt this.
Correct, for the direct distribution piece, correct.
Would they have to be on the same schedule as the county to consider it for adoption?
No,
Okay,
no,
because they're separate entities.
correct, yep. So here's an estimate for DeKalb County. So this is for all units. So this is before the distribution to the cities and towns within your county. So based on 2023 BMV registration data that we were able to obtain, and then again, subtracting out the 15 cents per registration for the branch fees for the BMV, tried to provide some estimates at the $7.50 minimum, and then the $50 surtax maximum of what they would generate for countywide units for the excise surtax. So anywhere from the 386,000 up to 2.6 million countywide. And again, this will be provided to you. Now for the wheel tax portion, you can see the different classifications there to the vehicles it would apply to. Based on the number of registrations, again, subtracting out the branch fees for the BMV that they would retain. You can see at a minimum $5 rate would be around $35,000, and then up to the $80 rate would be $583,000 countywide that could be generated through this mechanism. So if we put it all together and then we distribute it based on that local road and street formula of population and mileage, you can see that DeKalb County government would retain about just shy of 73% of the funds that are raised. So putting the wheel tax and excise surtax funds together, it would be anywhere from $308,000 up to $2.3 million. That would be generated yearly through this mechanism. And then you can see the distributions to the other local units of government in your communities and what their minimum and maximum estimated distributions would be through a countywide LOHUT. And we did obtain the mileage population data from the state comptroller in 2024. Now again, on the excise surtax side, you could do it as a percentage based. It gets a bit more complicated to estimate because then you need to look at the vehicle age of each registration as well as the vehicle classification, which is associated with the value of the vehicle when it was manufactured. And then there's a base fee schedule there. And again, it's very hard to see here, but it's just illustrative purposes to show that there's a base fee schedule. And then based on that, the percentage, whether it's 2% up to 20%, you can figure out what that rate per vehicle age and classification would be. Now, again, there are a couple carve-outs. So down at the bottom here, and trailers up to 9,000 pounds, they just have a flat $8 base fee. Motor-driven cycles are $10. and vehicles manufactured before 1981 are 12. So it doesn't matter the age or value of those classifications, it's just a flat base fee of which the percentage would be applied.
Kind of going along that same line, it's here in DeKalb County because of our antique vehicles, that's always a question. Are you gonna get the maximum from a vehicle that was manufactured in 1912?
Right.
Can you exempt historic plated vehicles or vehicles over a certain age?
That's a great question as well. To my knowledge, I don't believe there's a mechanism for a local unit to be able to add exemptions to the list. I think what would happen is because the vehicles manufactured before 1981 has a base fee of $12, although there is a minimum on this too. So even if you picked like a 2% percentage fee, they would still have to pay the $7.50 because you can't go below $7.50.
This is on the percentage basis.
Correct.
So going back the other way,
It'd still
we
be,
set the actual fee, we could take an antique vehicle and set a lower fee.
yeah, you could set the antique vehicle at the lowest allowable fee, which is the $7.50. Correct, yes. So I tried to show what that schedule would look like if a 20% maximum fee. Again, this will be provided to you so that you can see it in a larger text there. But that would be the fee schedule that would then be applied towards your registered vehicles within your community. So that's why we don't have estimates at this time, because it's not as easy as just saying number of registrations times this flat amount is this estimate. We'd have to go in and look at every individual registration. So we're not able to provide that at this time, but this is an option if you wanted to have a scale of an older, lower value vehicle has a lesser amount than a brand new, higher value vehicle. So in this case, if it was a brand new vehicle that was $42,500 or greater in value, I believe the base rate was $582, of which if you had the 20% excise surtax fee, they would pay around a little over $100 for the wheel tax or the excise surtax portion of their registration fee.
How many counties? Do you have an idea how many counties have gone this way instead of the flat fee? Mostly.
Yeah, I don't know the exact number. I can speak from experience from Steuben County. I was actually serving as a county engineer and went through this process with the county, and we looked at this and put in place a 20% excise surtax fee with some provisions in there. So I know Steuben County has gone that route. I don't know other ones, but I can look into it and get you in contact with them if you're interested. Yeah, thank you. And then this is just a sample vehicle registration. Again, when Steuben County went through this process and did adopt it, we actually put together a chart so as folks went to register their vehicle the first time after this went into place, they could see what the different fees looked like. So for this particular vehicle, since it is a truck, the weight comes into play, so the 11,000 general truck format. So that means it would be an excise surtax fee rather than a wheel tax fee because of the weight. But in the yellow, orange, or yellow boxes, the classification is 14, the age is 13 years, the weight is 11,000 pounds. So that because this is a percentage-based community in Steuben County, those come into play because you need to know what those are to apply the 20% excise surtax. The county, again, is in green is Steuben, and that is the fee that is going to the county wheel tax excise surtax. The municipality is Angola. At this time, Angola does not have a wheel tax or excise surtax provision in place, so that's why the municipal wheel tax excise surtax box is $0. And then I wanted to point out the state registration fee in orange. $15 of that goes to the community crossings matching grant fund. So that is applied, $15 of that state registration fee is applied on every vehicle in the state of Indiana. So if you want to go and look at your registration tonight, when you get to into your car in the glove box, you can kind of see what yours looks like from that perspective. So getting into the community crossings direct distribution. So this is a new opportunity for local units of government to not have to apply for a grant, but get a direct revenue distribution through this mechanism. So looking at the legislative services fiscal impact, this beginning in fiscal year 2026, which is the state fiscal year, so July 1st of 25 this summer, there's going to be roughly 248 million, 250 million, let's say, in the community crossings matching grant pot of money. Now, of this, what the legislation did is they said, okay, beginning July 1st of this year, we're going to take 100 million and set that aside for the traditional community crossings matching grant program that you all are used to applying for. So now there's only 100 million available for that. They're also taking off, they're doing some transfers to the general fund for the railroad tax credit. Again, legislative services estimated this would be no more than 14.5 million, but that will come out of the pot of money, as well as a transfer of 20 million to the local tracks program to finish some, I believe, railroad separation crossing projects that ran out of funding, is my understanding. So instead of having a direct distribution this year, what the legislation said is they're going to carry over about 115 million to the next year to help build up that pot of money. So there's no direct distribution to local units in fiscal year 26. But once we come to fiscal year 27, that pot of money will have about 375 million. So that's the projected new revenue as well as the 115 million carryover. Again, taking off the taking off the 100 million for the grant program, the 14.5 million for the credit transfers, the 20 million for the local tracks, and then added new in fiscal year 27 is the city of Indianapolis has the opportunity to get 50 million if they can match it with 50 million of their own funds. So that was, through the negotiation process, I assume, in the legislature provision that got added. So it's estimated that beginning July 1st, 2026, there would be anywhere from 190 million up to 255 million that could be available for that direct distribution. Yes.
In that, so we're looking at, I think you're saying 190 to 254 million dollars. The state is saying you all can apply for, correct?
So this would not be an application process. This would be a direct distribution to your community based on if you have a wheel tax, excise surtax in place, and then it's proportioned based on lane miles of all the units that have a wheel tax, excise surtax in place.
But also then cities and towns.
Correct.
So we're giving out, essentially we're broadening the base of how many people are eligible.
So those,
It used to be just counties. Now it's counties, cities, and towns with less money.
so the units were eligible, all units were eligible to apply for grant funding through CCMG. But now to get a direct distribution where you don't have to go through an application grant process, now it's available to those that, basically those that are helping themselves. Now, again, I put that in quotes, that's not my own perspective, just what I've heard through other conversations. So yeah, if it's showing that a unit is trying to locally help themselves, then they don't have to go through this grant application process, they can just get the funds directly.
Funding is smaller.
For the grant application, correct, and with some of these other,
There's going to be more people trying to get it.
potentially, if they pass the wheel tax, excise surtax. That's,
There's just a smaller pot of money that's actually.
then when the traditional community crossings program was set up, yes. Although the projections is that this, my understanding of the projections is this is the only pot of money that has continued to grow, whereas other funds like the motor vehicle highway, which is funded on gas tax and some other smaller mechanisms, are either plateauing or starting to decline. So I think this is why this revenue source was targeted to look at how to distribute in different ways.
I know there was concern early on that if we went from road miles to lane miles, that counties would lose out on the potential amount. But I think AIC looked at it, and whether they did it through LTAP or someone, counties actually came out better than before using just lane miles.
Right, I think because of the volume, or I'll say the number of just pure miles that counties maintain, even though it might be a 2-lane, they have more they have more miles of road than perhaps, a smaller entity that might have less total miles but have 4-lane roads. So I think it did balance out that way.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Could you go back one slide and show again, what was the 2026 distribution? So there's no direct distribution in 26.
Correct, because they wanted to build that pot of money up for
So-
that year.
Fiscal year 27 starts July of 26.
Correct. Mm-hmm. Oops, excuse me. So if we look at July 1st, 2026, or the state fiscal year of 27, that direct distribution, again, estimated amount available of 190 million up to 255 million. That would be distributed based on the proportion of lane miles of eligible local units. So to be eligible, the local unit must have a wheel tax, excise surtax in place. So all 92 counties are able to have a wheel tax, excise surtax, and then again, the population 5,000 or greater for the municipalities. So these distribution amounts will vary considerably, perhaps at times, based on the funds available as well as the number of local units that are eligible. Currently, what we tried to do is estimate what that would look like if every eligible local unit had a wheel tax, excise surtax in place. So trying to give some conservative amounts. DeKalb County itself, so not distributed to your local units, this would come directly to DeKalb County. Based on that 190 million up to 255 available, DeKalb County could see 1.6 up to 2.1 million in fiscal year 2027 of a direct distribution. Now, if we look at the following year, so fiscal year 28, the funds go down a little bit of the base fund, so now we're at 275 million because it's just the estimated new revenue. There's no carryover from a previous year. And again, we have the 100 million set aside for the traditional community crossings matching grant program. Still have the tax credit transfer. Still have the local tax transfer. And again, if Indianapolis is able to match it, taking into consideration that appropriation for them, then there could be 89 million up to 155 million available for distribution. So for DeKalb County, that could be around 700,000 up to 1.3 million estimated.
Considerably lower.
Correct, because the amount available for direct distribution is lower. The previous year, it was 190 million up to 255, but that's because they carried over that 115 million from the year prior where there was no direct distribution.
All right, now I'm going to get ahead of you again, probably.
Probably, but that's okay.
That's the direct distribution. Isn't there a next level
So,
they can apply for?
so in this case, yes, it gets a little nuanced here. So the Community Crossings Matching Grant Program of that 100 million that comes off the top for that program. DeKalb County could still apply for those grant dollars only if your direct distribution is less than the cap of the grant program. So I'll give an example. Let's say the cap is 1.5 million that NDOT sets for the matching grant program. In this year, if you receive the 1.3 million in direct distribution, then that 200,000 difference of 1.5 minus 1.3, so that $200,000 difference, you could apply for grant funds for $200,000. But no entity could get more than what the cap is by combining a direct distribution and a grant. NDOT.
How do they
I do not have that answer. Because it was 1 million for the first few years, then it bumped up to 1.5. If I was a betting person, I would probably say they might be dropping it because they have less funds to distribute now. Because in the past, Community Crossings Matching Grant has given out almost 350 million a year between the two calls. Now they only have a 100 million for the entire year. So they'll most likely go to just one grant call, which is why we saw that they put a hold on the July call for this year because of these changes. But that's within their administrative duties to decide how that gets done.
Some of the gas tax dollars that they collect go into this fund?
No. So a lot of the gas tax, that goes into the Motor Vehicle Highway Fund, as well as some go into the Local Road and Street Fund, you get monthly distributions for your agency through a very convoluted distribution matrix. Yes. Which actually I could send you, at LTAP, we call it a bead demo, so we have a bunch of buckets of little beads that represent certain dollar proportions, and we go through that distribution matrix, that spider web, with beads to kind of visually show where those dollars go. So that is on our YouTube channel if you're interested in looking at how that gets filtered through the process.
And essentially, as cars and vehicles get better gas mileage, you buy less gas, so that's why the distribution, the Local Road and Street and the Highway Fund continues to go down, because cars and vehicles are more efficient in their use. So this is having to look for a different way to maintain the many, many miles of roads that we have.
Right. So I have one more fiscal year that we'll look at, fiscal year 2029. So again, beginning in July 1st of 28. About 294 million available of the estimated new revenue. We have the 100 million for the grant program coming off the top. Now this no longer has the tax credit transfer. So that no longer happens. So that sunsets. In fiscal year 28 was the last year that happens. We still have the local tracks distribution of 20 million, which I believe goes another year after this, but we didn't project out that far. So that will eventually sunset as well, unless a legislative session extends it. We still have the 50 million to Indianapolis. So what's estimated to be available for distribution is 124 million up to 174 million. So then again, with DeKalb County, That could be anywhere from 1 up to 1.5 million, estimated if every eligible unit had a wheel tax, excise surtax in place.
Those numbers represent what would be coming in from the state for essentially community crossings, not the dollars that we would generate from the wheel tax itself.
Correct. Yes. So if we look at just the community crossings program as a whole for the next several years, you know, this is a chart directly from the fiscal impact statement from Legislative Services at the State House. Their estimates for the total funds available within that funding mechanism, the matching grant amounts, so the 100 million per year that gets put aside each year for the grant program, the railroad tax credit transfers, so the maximum that they estimate could be transferred to the general fund in those first 3 years, the local tracks program that gets transferred to the state highway fund because they administer that program of the 20 million. And then starting in fiscal year 27, the 50 million opportunity for the city of Indianapolis if they're able to match it with their own $50 million. So then you can see what that direct distribution amount range could be starting in fiscal year 27 and what that looks like for DeKalb County for 27, 28, and 29. Again, this is estimated based on every local unit.
Jennifer, what is the tracks program essentially? What does that do?
So that was a program where there were funds set aside to have at-grade railroad crossings separated. So either a bridge across for the railroad or a bridge across for the motor and pedestrian traffic.
That for any road or just state highways or?
So my understanding is it was for local roads, and they had the local tracks program for quite some time and had projects funded. There again, I don't believe this is for new projects. I believe it's to get existing projects through the finish line. I could be mistaken on that. I haven't been able to get exact clarification, but through just other anecdotal conversations, that's what I perceive. But if it is available, then perhaps there are local projects that they would have a grant call for. But that's within INDOT's purview. You're welcome.
What's, just out of curiosity, what's the deadline for Indianapolis to have that matching fund for their 50 million?
So the matching fund for them, I believe, would be prior to the fiscal year starting in July 1st of 2026. Let me go back.
This isn't a 50 million one time, it's each year.
Yeah, so it starts in fiscal year 27 for the state. So I believe Indianapolis would have to show their matching amount prior to July 1st of 2026.
They have to match it every year.
That's my understanding, yes, in the legislation.
If they don't, what happens?
Those dollars would go down into the direct distribution pot. So it would just, and I don't know, there are some conversations on, well, what if Indianapolis can only match, 25 million? Does that mean they get 25 of the 50? Is it an all or nothing? I don't have those answers currently. There's a lot of administrative things that are still being worked out on how the intent of the legislation is going to be implemented. So some of those questions could fluctuate based on the latitude of how the language is written for the state law. But yeah, great questions, great questions. So just in summary, pretty much what we know, low HUT, the two taxes, wheel tax, excise surtax, adopt them concurrently. For wheel tax, it's only a flat fee, so you could do anywhere from $5 minimum up to $80 maximum. For the excise surtax portion, you have the option flat fee of $7.50 up to $50, or that percentage-based, which you can get into the weeds a little bit on what that would look like for DeKalb County if you did a 2% minimum up to a 20% maximum. And I failed to mention when we were talking about this before, I believe you could put your own minimum dollar amount as well. So the minimum overall is $750, but if you went with, let's say, a 2% excise surtax, you could say we want 2% excise surtax, or instead of the $7.50 minimum, we'd actually like it to be a $15 minimum. You can't go below the $7.50, but you could go higher. So there's a lot of options for local units to make it what works best for your community. So again, the estimated revenue there for DeKalb County itself, so your distribution, after everything gets distributed to the cities and towns, could be $308,000 at the minimum, up to $2.3 million if you did the maximum for both taxes. And then again, to qualify for that direct distribution that starts in fiscal year 27, you have to have this adopted. We're still getting clarification on what that means. What that deadline means is that you just have to have an ordinance passed and approved, or does that mean you have to start collecting those dollars? I think right now it's just having it on the books. Now, whether that means you could pass it in June of 2026 to be eligible in July of 2026, I'm not sure either, because sometimes the state shuts down a little bit in June. They don't do a lot of processing of local units, at least from the grant side of things. So I don't know if there will be an earlier deadline for that. That's still being discussed within the state agencies and the legislators, as far as my understanding goes. And then again, if you did have the wheel tax, excise surtax in place and are eligible for the direct distribution, over the different years, it could be anywhere from $700,000 up to $2.1 million conservatively at this time. So what we don't know is a lot of what we discussed today. So when the direct distribution will be distributed, does that mean, July of 26, the auditor will get, a statement saying, here's your funds? Will it be in August, September, October? We're not quite sure, because some of it does depend on when NDOT needs information on what communities are eligible for the grant program and at what amount, because your direct distribution does impact if you're eligible and at what amount for the grant program. So some of those are being worked out currently. How it's going to be distributed, will it need to have its own fund? Will it go into like an MVH or an LRS fund as a line item? I don't think some of those have been decided by State Board of Accounts and the State Comptroller. I think they're still working through some of those nuances. And then, of course, the amount. That's still up for calculation, depending on how many communities do pass a wheel tax, excise surtax, and then how much funds are available to be distributed, whether Indianapolis can match it, whether the estimated revenue does come in on target, or if it's overestimated, underestimated. It just kind of varies from year to year. But I hope this was at least informative, get some discussion going. If the community's interested in moving forward, we're happy to have further conversation. Again, Susan, I'll try to get this to you in some manner, or I guess if you're able to just save it here and, okay, and then you can distribute it to the community members. As a PowerPoint file, it's fairly large. I couldn't email it, but I think if it's saved as a PDF, it should be able to be distributed.
Jennifer, I didn't see a line item on the options with the amounts for buggies. Do buggies in the communities that already have this adopted, do buggies pay this?
That's a great question. As far as I know, within the legislation, there's not an option for buggies to pay this tax. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Which we have, correct? We have the buggy.
I mean, they're a
ordinance
plated
with an
vehicle,
amount.
correct? So, okay.
I got another question. Are these four-wheelers that run up and down the roads, are they plated too?
So they would
Correct. Yeah,
so they're on the road.
mhm.
Damage.
Yeah, because the vehicle exemption list is because those vehicles are subject to being a plated vehicle, but then they exempted them from this particular tax or fee. But I believe those do not have to have plates, is that correct? They're exempted from registering? Okay. Again, I thank you for your time and happy to have further conversation or assistance as needed. Thank you.
Jennifer?
Thank you very much for coming down here. Well, we're a little bit behind, but it's your turn, Jeff. Peters, please, you can come up and start your presentation.
Thank you all. Appreciate the opportunity to be here. We did forward up a revised fiscal plan, considerably different than what you've seen in past years. What we had previously done was to do a projection out to 3 years. And typically 3 years is a good time period to do a projection. It's pretty accurate, helps you as the fiscal body and the fiscal officer to make good decisions with foresight. However, what the legislature has done is to implement reductions to property taxes serially through 2031. So we blew out this for you to get to 2032 because I wanted to see the back end of once you get all these implementations and what it looks like. So for 1% property, you have the property tax reductions occurring beginning next year all the way through 2031 that basically gets a 1% or a homestead property down to 1/3 of its gross assessed value. You also have 2% property getting those property tax reductions from next year through 2031 to basically get their assessment down to 2/3 of their gross value. And then you also have business personal property beginning in pay 2027, exempting the $2 million. The exemption today is $80,000. So if you have small businesses that have desk computers, maybe a little bit of manufacturing equipment, things like that, under $80,000, they don't report. So it doesn't show up on your AB. That amount jumps to $2 million for pay 2027. So what is the result of taking all this assessed value out of the tax base? It is going to drive up tax rates, the levels that we haven't seen for decades. When you drive up those tax rates, we're going to have more properties qualify for the 1%, 2%, and 3% tax credit or tax caps. So we're going to have more circuit breaker generated, which is going to cause you to net collect fewer property tax dollars. On top of that, the legislature said for these homestead properties, we're also going to have a tax credit of 10% of their tax bill or $300, which again is going to cause you to net collect fewer property tax dollars for your operations and your property tax fund. So today, if you are imposing $100 in tax and you collect 95, after all this is done, that amount now might be 85 or 82 or 87, something to that effect. So you're going to have these property tax losses that result from the reduction in AV, the increase in tax rates, and these tax credits filing in. So that's the first part of what they've done.
In addition to that, they gave additional credits to over 65 and veterans, if I'm not mistaken, plus previously the average floor for the depreciation schedule was 30%. They've done away with the floor. Now you can actually depreciate equipment to zero. Is that true?
It will be, for the majority of those properties that fit in that pool, you are correct. So property, business personal property put in to effect after January 1 of 25 will no longer have, so that's January, the first assessment date, because it's after January 1, 25, will be January 1, 26, pay 27. So now those properties that previously, or that property that previously depreciated to a 30% floor now goes to zero.
Which removes it off of assessed value.
Yes, you'll just see it depreciate out and it'll go completely to the floor. Now, there are other pools that don't qualify, like
Quick question.
steel mills. They have a different pool that goes to 10%. Some of their properties capped at 30, some's at 10. Those things will remain, but the majority will go potentially to zero.
How is that property depreciated over?
The statutory schedule that just lumps it down. And it's, accelerated pretty quickly. So within the first 6 or 7 years, it's typically at the floor. So now I think there will be 2 more steps. We used to cut off all our abatement analysis at 30% because we were going to capture it as a 30% floor. There are 2 steps below that I believe they'll hit. So 2 more years after what would have normally been the 30%, and then it'll fall off to nothing. But as you go out into the future, that will impact your assessed value again by, depleting the tax base that you were otherwise replenishing as these businesses invested in new property, depreciated it. I think it will give some incentive for businesses to replace that property, because now stuff that is there today at a 30% floor, they can replace with more efficient equipment and fully depreciate it across that time down to zero. So I would suspect that will happen. What we did is we built a model based on the county abstract data for these different components, work those in to try and indicate what we believe will happen. As we've talked about before, the circuit breaker impacts are not linear, they're calculus arcs. Everything we've put in here is linear. So if the county wants a more precise estimate of what that impact is, you can hire a parcel by parcel analysis. I know Policy Analytics out of Indianapolis does a lot of this. I don't know how expensive they are, and I don't know how long the line is now that all this has gone through. I've got another client that is working with, I think, Data Pit Stop. You guys work with Data Pit Stop as well? Okay. But that being said, the model that we've put forward for you, I think, is a fair indication of where we believe it is headed in this period up to 2032. The other major impact that occurs is in 2027, all the local income tax that we have in place today and what we know all goes away completely. whether you're giving property tax credits, economic development income tax, public safety income tax, public safety access point income tax, EMS income tax, certified shares, PTRC, all of it goes out the window at the end of 27. So now we have a whole new regime beginning in 28. The enabling legislation for these new income taxes don't take effect until July 1 of 27. So you can't adopt any of this before July 1 of 27, and you have to have it done by October 1 of 27 to go in effect for January of 28, so that you'll continue to have income tax distributions in 28. Couple points on that is both the legislators that helped push this through on the floor in the final hours, they gave that spiel of, we know this isn't perfect, but we've got time. We can adjust it. So setting that date at July 1 of 27, they can use the 26th session and the 27th session to make amendments to this. And I think that will happen. I think it'll probably be more in 27 than 26 because that's going to be a long legislative session.
One of the biggest questions and biggest issues are the fact that we have to reauthorize those local option income taxes yearly. We can't set them and then just leave them go until we decide we want to change it.
Yes.
So if we plan for 3 years, 4 years, and we miss the renewal one time, you've lost that whole year's worth of revenue.
Well, and they've already done the damage to the bonding portion of that. Because previously, markets all looked at that income tax because it was non-revocable while the bonds were outstanding, and it continued on until you rescinded it, that it was an ongoing revenue stream, which had been pledged to the payment of bonds and was a good security. Now it will not be viewed that way. So everything we do, I think, will have to be underwritten with a base security of property tax.
So right now,
Unless they fix
any of our bonds that are being paid with local option income tax, like the community corrections bond, when that goes away, then we have to come up with another way to pay those bills. And community corrections may be done by that time, wouldn't it?
I don't know that it's going to be done by that time, but yes, when you implement your new income tax rate, that will need to be considered. And they did put in what they thought was a good cure was, even if you fail to do your income tax stuff because of that bond is outstanding, pledged with income tax, minimally, you will get that much income tax imposed in order to make that debt service payment. I don't think Standard & Poor's is really going to like that when we go to rate stuff. Hopefully, the stuff that's out there currently doesn't get downgraded really hard because, again, I think that will drag on your next debt issuance when you go to do a bond rating. But the good news about the income taxes that come into effect in 2028, and this is really only good news for counties that I've seen so far, and you particularly because you've been prudent about how much you've deployed in income tax. But the reason I also worked this model out to 2032 is I wanted to impose the maximum that you were allowed in income tax to make sure that you could offset all the income tax streams that you've lost, plus the estimated property tax losses out of this bill. When we look at if you were to impose, and what you're allowed to at the county level is 1.2% for county services. And again, you can use that to replace your certified shares, your economic development income tax, to pay the debt service on those outstanding highway building bonds, and use it for all the other operations that you want. If you were to impose that full amount, you have more than enough money to offset all that, and you have, and you'll see it in the general fund, like the second to the last line is excess or reductions to the cash balance. So when it's positive, we're adding to cash balance. When it's negative, you're eating cash. So you'll see in those out years after 28, you have millions of dollars in additional money that you could be bringing in. And if you go to that max, you will be bringing in.
None of that's shareable like public safety is now shareable with the cities. That 1.2 remains with the county.
It goes directly to the county. I won't speak as to shareability. I'll leave that to legal counsel, but it is yours only for county operations at this point. You know, maybe something weird could be carved out, but there are other income tax components that I'm going to walk through with you for the other entities. But again, my major test to this is I wanted to make sure that you could get to the backside of it and you're fundable. That way now you have solutions and things to talk about. So when we get to this 27 adoption for you as the county level, you can decide, yeah, we're not going to collect an extra $3 million a year. We're just going to make it meet our budget. We'll address it year to year and make sure that we balance accordingly. Or when we got to talking about the wheel tax, surtax, one of the comments that I sent up to you is the MVH fund's going to eat millions of dollars of cash over that time period. So you really need to fill it with something. Wheel tax, surtax, as you just saw, is certainly an option. You're incentivized to impose some of that so that you get some of this new distribution. If you don't, you won't. So to get your fair share, there, as the legislature does, they put you at the line that you need to do this to your own people in order to get what you need. That being said, that would help fill some of that gap. Also, I think you could use income tax. So instead of taking an extra $4 million or $3 million, whatever's in that line, you know, take $1.5 million in additional income tax every year and use that to target road projects. If you know, prefer not to do a wheel tax surtax or not a bigger wheel tax surtax, and you're just going to do the minimum to get your amount.
Which that just changed this year, didn't it? Previously, we weren't allowed to transfer money from the general fund to the highway fund.
Yeah, you're not allowed, and we still don't know what the rules are going to be from the Board of Accounts. I would say because this is classified as general revenue, they will make it all go to the general fund. But being a general revenue, I don't see a reason why you could not appropriate projects in the form of roads from the general fund. Alternatively, if the Board of Accounts says, oh, no, you know, you can't do that, then you make your rainy day distribution from the general fund to the rainy day fund, and you can certainly appropriate your rainy day funds for any road project you want. So if we have to play a shell game, which, you know, kind of silly, but the Board of Accounts, they have their certain things that they want to see. So alternatively, I think you could potentially do it with income tax if you want to fund some of those deficits, or if you have other projects that you want to fund and implement. I think you will have income tax ability when you get to that point to cover all your losses and continue forward as you have, you know, presently. From the other units of government, and the reason I bring this up is because you, as the fiscal body of the county, will be the adopting body for income taxes, except for cities and towns with a population above 3,500. So these entities, and let's just start with those cities and towns above 3,500, they can also put in a 1.2% income tax rate. That is stackable. So now if you impose 1.2 out in the county and the city imposes 1.2, now those people's rate's 2.4. Nothing you can do about that. The other thing that we are seeing in cities and towns is when we impose that 1.2 and we're having to estimate what the income tax base is within inside a city or town, because those data sets don't exist. And one of the things in this legislation is, beginning in '25, Department of Revenue has to collect where everybody lives, because they're gonna have to build those data sets. So what I've done in different places is just look at per capita income, population count, and then equalize that to a county income tax base that I know to come up with an estimate. All these estimates I've done, no city is going to replace its existing income tax stream, let alone offset its property tax losses with that 1.2%. So the other options in the new lit legislation is you as the county can impose up to 0.4% for fire and EMS. If you impose any rate up to that 0.4 for that purpose, each fire district, fire territory, and municipal fire department, which by definition should be any city or town that has a fire department, they will get a distribution of that. You also have to decide at that point in time and at the county and income tax level, are you going to share that with township that have fire departments, volunteer fire departments? And in some instances, I actually have a township fire department client that is the size of a second-class city and has like a $30 million a year fire budget. It is a big township. A lot of those don't exist around the state, but you need to look at that from your community and say, okay, I assume all of these people are going to come to you with their requests and say, hey, you know, we need the 0.4. Or in some instances, it's going to be, we need the 0.4 and we're still not going to get there, which those people I think are going back to the legislature and are going to be, yeah, 0.4 doesn't work universally across the state. I'm going to need 0.6. And I'm sure they're going to be asking too that don't make it a may of the county council to adopt this, make it a shall to make sure that we get our revenue stream. Because who wants to hire firefighters only to have them gone when their income tax stream goes away because they have no control over it?
No, I know we've fought those fights before, changing may to shall and shall to may, and but then the fire and EMS, that's distributed based on population and
Square miles of
square
service
miles.
area, another data set that doesn't exist.
But what does that do to, assuming a township that does not have a fire department is going to get less revenue and now may not be able to pay their fire bill or their contract to the local fire department that covers them? Because we're not going to give money to that township, we'd be giving the money to the fire department.
Yes, but if you give it to the volunteer fire department, and let's say they serve 2 townships, that distribution applies to them as well, which is population served and square miles served multiplied by 20. Again, arbitrary number they pulled out of the air. But there is a distribution mechanism for that. Just want you to be aware that you should be getting input from those local units of government as to why they're going to need this and how it is incumbent upon you to act on their behalf. In addition to that, you know, today, townships, libraries get income tax distributions. You guys have, does the solid waste district get its own, and it gets an income tax distribution as well? They also get an income tax distribution? Okay. So, third part of the lit legislation is you can, for those units of government, you can impose up to 0.2. You can only impose up to 0.05 for each category. And you guys have 4 categories, so 0.5, 0.5, 0.5, 0.5. That gets you to your 2 if everybody gets 0.5. And that distribution is done by population.
The airport, the solid waste district covers the entire county, so I have an issue with that. But the one that I've actually started to have conversations with some of the libraries, because right now we have 4 libraries, each has their own territory. But if we were to impose this local option income tax to get money to those libraries, I think I was, as a council person, would have a very difficult time authorizing a tax that would apply to everybody. But I'm only going to give money to these 4 libraries who might say, well, Fairfield Township, you don't belong to this library, so you don't get any of the money. You can't get a book. You can't get a book from my library because you don't pay the tax. So I think that these libraries are going to have some discussion amongst themselves as to how they're going to handle that, because they still would get some property tax distribution, would they not?
Yeah, they're still going to get their property tax distribution less these losses that they're going to experience. But their income tax is gone unless you, as the county council, reimpose it and impose it every year. And I have not looked at any county's underlying entities until we get further down the path, and we can have that discussion, because I don't know if we want to do it now or if we want to wait and see what changes in the 26th session.
What was the fourth? You had library, solid waste, airport, and what was the fourth category to that?
Townships. An additional wrinkle on that is total amount of lit that can be imposed from the county is 2.9%. The total of the 1.2 to the county, the 0.4 to fire and EMS, and the 0.2 to the underlying taxing units can't equal more than 1.7. So if you do 1.2, 0.4, and 0.2, that's 1.8. So you have to cut another 0.1 out of one of those categories or combination thereof. So somebody's getting shorted out of that.
Currently, we have a local option income tax that supplements or offsets property tax. That goes away.
That goes away, and that's been worked in here as well, and that is, again, the upward pressure on tax rates, because that income tax that you were subsidizing property tax bills kept people from hitting the tax cap. When that goes away, you're going to get, again, this jump up. But that has been estimated in here as part of the loss to your property tax collection. The last part of the new lit is you can impose up to 1.2% for the cities and towns under 3,500. You can also, as the county, keep 75% of that amount and use it for countywide purposes that also benefit those
Which is the
small
only
cities
way,
and towns.
Again, it goes back to the county council has to pass a tax on everybody, and the money's only going to get distributed to those towns under 3,500.
Not quite, and I missed a big part of that. The income tax that you would impose for the small cities and towns up to 1.2% excludes the big towns above 3,500 that have imposed their own. So you're not going to stack that third stack on top of them.
In our case, Auburn and Garrett are exempted from that.
Assuming they do it, which they will. So yes, they'll be exempted, but it'll apply to the rest of the county. You only have to share 25% with those small cities and towns. And the other 75% you can use for county purposes that benefit all. Assumably, it would be outside of Garrett and Auburn because they're not paying in, but, you know, I don't know that there's going to be real differentiation on those revenue pools. Or you can give all of it to those small cities and towns.
It puts a lot of pressure on council, and that's exactly what their intent was.
Yes.
County council is now the driving force for revenue in the county.
My question is, okay, we put this 1.2% on like Waterloo, and they, in that partial, can they support their library as far as the grant Waterloo Grant Township Library. Instead of us putting another 2% on for a 0.2 on for libraries and stuff. And the same way with Auburn, if they're gonna put their own 1.2 on, why can't they run their own libraries out of that instead of being a county deal?
I will bet you $1 to a donut that Auburn and Garrett will both come to you and tell you that 1.2% on their income tax base will not be enough to make them whole as to where they are today. And that they're going to need you to impose that 0.4, or they may even go to you, because I know in different places around the state, we're going to be going and saying, yeah, 0.4 is not going to get us there. It's going to have to be 0.55 or 0.6. And again, you know, we don't want it to be on the back of the county council. But, you know, you're exactly right. The legislature left it on your back because they could have made all this, you shall do this, this, this. Then you would have had no choice. You would have got to implement it, and everybody would have to figure out how they live on it. They are giving you home rule back. They're definitely giving home rule back to the bigger cities and towns. But, you know, from what I'm seeing in my analysis so far, it's not enough for them to continue what they're doing today.
There will be a lot of change made in the 26th legislature, and quite honestly, one of the speakers at the state-called meeting for county councils is Jeff Thompson, who is chairman of House Ways and Means. And this whole income tax thing is something he's been working on for a number of years. So if you want the opportunity to question him on it, that'd be the place to be, is that state-called meeting.
So specifically to kind of current terms, as we had talked previously about your income tax distributions under the current cycle, you had great collections and great increases in collections starting in 21. In 22, it pretty much flatlined. And then in 23, it has actually scaled back from 22. So I don't know exactly what is going on with overall income tax revenue in DeKalb County, but it has scaled back across those years compared to what we thought the growth trajectory was. And that has two impacts. One is your supplemental income tax distributions that you've been getting in May. I think you're going to get another one next year. That's only going to be about half or a little bit more of what this year's is. And then in 27, I don't think you're going to get one at all, because the way they're distributing versus what your collections look like, I think that excess cash pool kind of runs out. That being said, you are consuming over the next couple of years a good amount of cash out of the general fund, but your budgets are just more than that revenue stream is, and the biggest part of that is income tax scaling back. Again, all that to me is kind of minimal because we're going into a whole new thing in 28. We don't know exactly what the impact of all this legislation is going to be between now and 2031. The other thing with income tax, there is a residual balance in the income tax pool at the state, and that's the formula in which they use to measure how big that is to give you your supplemental distribution. That amount in the new legislation, I could not find anywhere where they pay it back out to you. So I don't know when it's coming back to you. I don't think the state's going to try and keep it because, you know, they measured on your behalf, pay you interest on it. But in your model, I just pegged it as a balance there. So I think you will have some of that residual balance coming back to you. I'm assuming it's going to be in 27, 28, or 29. I don't know if they're going to wait for the audited receipts and say, okay, your 27 collection in 2029, they're going to say your 2020 collection was really this, therefore you're owed this amount of money. Because the new income tax regime that starts in 28 specifically says they're starting over in a new fund, and they are going to distribute you 95% of what they estimate as the revenue. for the first 3 years, build a 15% balance. Then they're going to distribute you 100% after that. So again, I've built that into the income tax model for 28, 9, and 30. It's 95% of what we think the projection is. And then after that, it's 100% of it. That's kind of the big picture of where I think you're at. Like I say, 26 and 27, you're going to start to see some of these property tax losses, but revenue stream outside of the income tax we just talked about, generally consistent with what you've had previously. I don't see any reason to, say the sky is falling and pull back on a whole lot of stuff.
One of the questions we had last year, and we asked the question too late to do anything about it, whether or not any of the funds had excessive amounts of residual from year to year. I think you mentioned the assessment fund had grown large. What's going to be the best way to handle that, to either reduce the amount of money that's going in there via property tax, or
Yes.
maybe not to pay more expenses out of that, but to reduce the amount of property tax that's there?
That is typically the only way to reduce that fund, is just to short it year after year until you get it to the balance that you want it to be. So,
Is there a number, a dollar amount that we should be shooting for to hit after?
well, you started 25 with $2.7 million in that fund, and last year you spent $420,000.
Yeah.
I can't see keeping more than 1 year's balance on hand, even a half a year's balance. So, $200,000 to $400,000 a year. Your tax levy for this year was $414,000, or that's what the net's going to come out to be. So yeah, I would work with the DLGF, because one of the things that they have historically pushed on is to make sure that you had reassessment funded. They did not ever want to see you run out of those funds. You're on the other end of the scale. I would see if you can take it all the way down to zero for the foreseeable future, in order to get that back. Now, the DLGF may balk at that. They do have a new commissioner now. I don't know what their thoughts are on that. But yes, that would be a good way to utilize that excess cash, get more levy into your general fund.
What would our deadline be that we'd need to? Because we're going to be doing budgets and stuff in July and August, so.
It will be all part of that process.
Okay.
Yeah, and we can put it in at zero and see if the DLGF balks, or you can have that conversation with your field rep.
And it wouldn't, we put it in at zero, and 3 years from now or 4 years from now, we want to put it back in, we would not run into any kind of
Correct. It is not rate driven. It is not a statutory formula. It is an allocation done in your budget cycle of your max levy. I pegged a base 2% growth for all the property, and also the increased growth in homesteads based on the population growth that you had experienced in the last 4 years. Which, I'm assuming is going to be conservative. But again, I'm going clear out to 2032. There's no recession in here. So yeah, even in my high growth communities, I've only gone to like a 5% base growth. So for years I kept 2. But in 2024, your AV was only up 0.63%. In 22, it was up 6.22. 23, it was up 11.2. And this year it was up 8.45, so kind of all over the board. And, hopefully growth exceeds that. and that will help you suffer less property tax loss. And Rick had talked about, hearing Jeff Thompson speak. Jeff Thompson's going to tell you that none of this is a problem and that growth will take care of all this. I hope that's true. And in a high enough growth environment, it probably, you still suffer losses, but it potentially could take care of itself. I don't know that I would project that here in DeKalb County, though.
There's a headline in the morning paper today about DeKalb County's average income is higher than most of the state. We've what was 5 o'clock this morning when I read that, so we're in the top 8.
That's great.
And the only one in this region that's above the state average. What about the highway fund?
The highway fund, like I say,
anything-
it's gonna consume, across this time period, it consumes like $4 million in cash. So I think you're going to have to address it in one or more ways. Wheel tax, surtax has the ability, I think, to cure it completely at this point, other than I don't know what projects the highway department has that have not been funded. No, over that whole time period. So if you look at like page 17, second to the last line is net increase or decrease in fund. You're expected to eat about $250,000 this year in cash. And in 2032, you're expected to eat about $870,000 a year in cash. And I'm assuming by looking at the amount that's in personal services of that, there's not a whole lot of project stuff included in that MVH fund. So I assume there is an entire list of roads that need attention that are probably beyond the funding capacity of MVH and MVH restricted and local road 3.
I assume you're going to be a phone call away when we start doing our budgets, right?
Absolutely. And I think I would lean on your LTAP person to help maybe run those scenarios for you, since they're already paid. That way you wouldn't have to incur other charges to get your estimates as to what you want your revenue to be and what that impact looks like. But if they cannot do that, we're more than willing to help do that. But I think, at a minimum, you'll want to impose your minimum low HUT just so that you get this extra distribution. Otherwise, you're not going to get your share of that pool.
That is a nice, best thing is no requirement that you have the maximum, just that you have the low HUT.
Well, this legislative session.
Well, I know. Everything could change. Everything's always going to change. But as long as you have it, it doesn't have to be at its maximum. It could be at the minimum.
Yeah.
You would qualify.
But again, the legislature, that would not surprise me that that'll be on the next agenda. Not only do you have to help yourself, but you have to help yourself by this month. Anything else I can help with? I know that's not great news, but it is good news that you have a funding solution at the end. Like I say, everybody I've been with so far that's not a county doesn't have as good a news as you have. And, I say that too, so that you'll understand as the other units of government come to you crying about how they don't have enough money. probably true when they do their projection, that they're not going to have enough to survive.
I have two comments to make. One is, we have a community correction out here. And this, did you figure that they were going to cut some of our fundings from our grants out of there?
I did not.
Okay. And the other one is the health department. It's going to be, what, $485,000 short of their programs that the previous administration started. Did you look at anything in that scenario or anything, what we could do to help them out?
I did not. Is that out of the new fund?
The HFI funding.
Okay, so not the one you fund out of your property tax.
No.
Yes.
So I think the only way for you to help that other fund would be to pay it out of some of these property taxes, which again would reduce the amount of excess income tax you have in these years after 2027. So again, if you wanted to remedy that, you certainly have cash balance that you could. And then in 2028, you just impose a greater income tax so that you can fund them as well.
Well, I hope by 2028 that they come back and re-support that health department, because they have some pretty nice programs going on. And then the grants, I don't know, one of the things when we passed that is that if we didn't get the grants, it would be hard to support our building out there. Because we passed that with the thought that, well, with the hoping, I should say, that we continue with our grants and stuff.
Yeah. I have not heard of that being restored, but.
Another story that was in the paper this morning is that apparently the governor has put an additional 5% reduction on the state's budgets. They already cut it 5%. Now he's asking them to withhold another 5%.
Okay. Gonna be tough times.
Well, is there any more questions for Jeff? We appreciate you coming up and spending your time.
Thank you so much.
None of us left crying, so you know, we did all right.
That'll start next month.
Start next. I have proposed, let's take a 5-minute break before we continue on.
Okay.
That works.
Everything, so we hit the second. back to order. Our next business is,
CF1
CF1 forms for
abatements
abatements.
compliance.
Compliance. CF1 forms.
The Tax Abatement Committee recommends to the council that all of these are within compliance.
And I did talk to Dave last night, once he visited everything. There. He said he doesn't want to. So I need a motion to accept.
I'll make that motion.
Have a second.
I'll second.
Is there any discussion on?
I just had a question. How does the committee go about looking at whether or not the salaries are at the point of where they said in their initial forms that that's where they would hiring people and then their total payroll? How do you guys get that information?
Just ask them the questions.
Okay,
As far as do they.
So we don't get any
Do
documentation.
they submit any paperwork? The only paperwork that they submit is their, what's the title of it? Every year they have to submit the paperwork.
right, but when we go back to verify them, we don't ask for any documentation from them to
Just ask.
verify.
We just ask them.
We just ask whether or not they're complying. Okay.
Basically what what I like to do is I just ask them about their operation, especially like the new ones. Like this year, the IBD, Irish Acres Biogas is the new one. And since that was our first visit there, I just asked about the process. And I mean, two gentlemen we met with went through the entire process, showed us the layout, gave us the timeline.
This was their first visit, right?
This was our first visit, and we met with, their accountant was there also, and we did ask, and he verified everything. We always ask if they have questions about the paperwork or if their communication has been sufficient. And I guess for me, it's just a great face-to-face with the business. And, you drive by places and you never know what they do until you stop and visit. But that, from the Irish Acres, since that was my first time there, it was very interesting. The one that could think of that thing to.
A lot of it revolves around whether or not the equipment is there, whether or not the equipment is operational, so.
So you hands-on looking at it.
I mean, that's the whole point of making the visit, is to
Just verify.
talk with them face to face.
Sure.
We've been out to SDI before for their last one was the push-pull line, and we got to actually see it in operation. You see the infrastructure, and then they kind of tell us, this is the purpose of this line to our entire operation.
Okay. That's it.
More questions?
Am I done?
I'll call for the vote. All in favor of it, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye.
4-1. Okay, the next deal on our schedule is joint resolution of, wait a minute, where am I at? Yeah, the commissioners and councilor honoring Donald Lauer. You want to read this?
Yeah, I can.
Let her read it because she's more clear. You got a copy?
Okay. Joint resolution of DeKalb County Commissioners, number 2025-R-8, DeKalb County Code 4-1-3-39, and DeKalb County Council Resolution number 2025 RCC-8. A resolution to honor friend and colleague Donald J. Lauer. Whereas Donald J. Lauer passed from this life on Monday, May 5th, 2025, and whereas Donald J. Lauer faithfully served the citizens of DeKalb County from 1991 to 2018, including 2 terms as DeKalb County Sheriff from 2011 to 2018. And whereas Donald J. Lauer distinguished himself in his public service to the citizens of DeKalb County, Indiana, serving as a patrolman, detective, and sheriff. And whereas Don also served his church and his community throughout his life as a member of Immaculate Conception Catholic Church and was a member of Knights of Columbus Council 9186. He gave of his time generously volunteering for Catholic charities, taking communion to residents of local nursing homes. Whereas Don's life of service is evidence of his strong faith in God, and whereas the county and citizens of this county are indebted to Don for his unselfish leadership and service to our community, and will be sorely missed by all those whose lives he touched. Now therefore be it resolved as follows, that the DeKalb County Commissioners and DeKalb County Council commemorate the life of Donald J. Lauer and acknowledge that in his passing, our community has lost a faithful and valued servant, and express our gratitude and respect for his unselfish public service. Be it further resolved that the DeKalb County Commissioners and DeKalb County Council convey our sincere sympathy to his wife Julie, daughters and sons-in-laws Elizabeth and Evan Maurer of Fort Wayne, and Anna and Austin Hasselhorst of Noblesville, and grandsons Russell and Jonathan Hasselhorst, his sister and brother-in-law Debbie and Langdon Adams of Fort Wayne, as well as his extended family. Be it further resolved that we do hereby declare June 11, 2025 as the day of official mourning for our departed friend and colleague, and we do direct that the flags of our country and of our county be flown at half-mast during this day as a sign of all of our respect for Donald J. Lauer. Be it further resolved that a copy of this resolution be filed in the permanent records of the county commissioners and the county council, and that a copy of this resolution be sent to the family of Donald J. Lauer. Duly enacted this 9th day of June by the DeKalb County Commissioners, this 11th day of June by DeKalb County Council. A motion to approve it, and then I have multiple copies that I need signed.
I'll call for a motion to
I'll
accept.
make a motion.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? We'll call for the vote. Everyone in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries 5-0. Okay, on the next one. Council discussion. Commissioners, do you have anything, commissioners?
Not very much, just a little update maybe on the health insurance. We have just finally muddled our way through that and have got that process in motion now to get everybody signed up. We've had, I think, 2 or 3 different meetings, special meetings, to get this thing ironed out. Have made significant changes, hopefully to get this thing back on track where it's more easily funded by the taxpayer, a little more responsibility on the employees as far as their obligation to support their own health and their well-being. So there are some changes that were made. Looking forward into the next year so we don't get behind the 8 ball, because we did end up behind schedule on this. We are going to require, I should say, that the Apex comes in quarterly and gives us an update on where we stand, how we're looking as far as what we need to do in the following year, to have that information, or at least partial information ahead of time, instead of getting it a month or 2 months before we actually have to make these decisions. Because it's just hard to get through it and to understand it and sort it all out. But we're on the right track, I think, to make things better for everybody. And any questions, be glad to answer if I can.
New insurance going to be, is that what you
Yes.
saw, PHP?
Yes.
And I just saw it this morning. Does PHP, is it accepted at Parkview, since that's what our local hospital is?
It's a broad network. It's
Okay.
Parkview, Lutheran, and IU Health.
Yeah.
Perfect.
All 3.
I know before there was some discrepancy with certain insurances only at certain hospitals.
Like I said, we made some
Go into that
adjustments.
category for a period.
Yes, I believe so.
Yes.
We got one little situation out Sunny Meadows. We have a resident who is on oxygen 24/7 and has been caught vaping. He's been notified, him and his trustee or guardian, that catch him one more time, we're going to need to evict him. We can't have somebody in there with open flame on oxygen participating in vaping. Not inside the building for sure. So just a heads up, there may be an eviction coming. We'll see how that works out.
We were wondering what to do with the building.
Let's not.
Any questions, comments? Thank you.
The, we've just had a presentation on wheel tax, and, Bill, this does involve the commissioners. You know, number one, if we do something with the wheel tax, that decision has to be made by September 1, and we're gonna be doing the budget here before too long, which will get us through most, July and August. But I believe that in order to do a budget and make a decision on whether or not we need the wheel tax, we need to know from the commissioners, from Ben, how much money do we need to bring all of our roads up to a minimum of level 5, and what is the replacement schedule for any bridges over the next 5 or 10 years. And
He
I'm
gave that to
I know he gave it to us, but I think we need to, that's gonna have to come from the commissioners, and Ben are gonna have to sit down and determine how much money do we need in 5 years or 10 years? I'm not hung up on doing it all in 5 years or even doing it all in 10 years, but given a fixed amount of time, how much money do we need each year to bring those roads up to a minimum of a level 5? And that's just now a ball in your court that we'll need that information at some point in the future.
Yeah. Ben just handed me a makeup of those numbers this morning. I haven't gone through it completely. He kind of explained some of it. So there are some numbers available now. He has put those together. And when we decipher that and digest that, we'll give that to the council. I'm sure he will present it.
And, I think it's up to you as the commissioners. Do you want to do it in 5 years? Do you want to do it in 10 years? You're going to see what the numbers are.
Yeah.
So just give us the advice that we need.
I think we can do that.
Okay.
Okay. Anything else?
Thank you, Bill. Okay, is there any other discussion that the council wants to bring ahead right now?
We have it, but there.
Anybody else has anything to say?
No, we've got those numbers that Ben gave us, but this is commissioner direction. I mean, what do they want as far as number of years, things like that.
Mr.
If you
Vice
guys-
President, go right ahead,
Nope,
sorry.
go for it.
No, go ahead.
No, because mine's different.
Well, I was going to adjourn us.
Oh, wait.
No,
If you have your handbook signature page, I will take it. That was all I had.
Well, thanks for tolerating me. Hopefully, I don't have to ever do this again, but we will be back here July what? And that'll be a budget meeting, regular meeting, then budget right afterwards, right?
Or is that
Let me look.
August?
It's
Well, yeah,
July
I know it's July.
July 9th.
Is that then?
Well, July 9th. Yeah. Council meeting and then budget presentations.
Okay.
9th and 10th.
9th, 10th. So be prepared for 2 long days. Okay.
Mr. Vice President, I make a motion that we adjourn.
Got a motion and a second. Everyone in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Get along. Goodbye.